The connection really is the challenge to be able to share one's experiences, to the challenge of reading other person's experiences and being able to expand that to the audience, to expand that with persons with whom you're talking. And frankly, I've always found it a challenge to just be able to see if indeed that story reflects my tenet of love, forgiveness, compassion, mercy. And if it does that, then I'm personally engaged. Then I share that with the audience. I came to preaching really, and I never thought of it as preaching per se. I thought of it as just reflecting on another story, reflecting on my own experiences. I think initially I was asked about a political situation, I think the anti-apartheid legislation. And then at another time I was asked to talk about the deaf. I should say parenthetically that my parents are deaf. My first language is sign language. And I enjoy telling stories. My mother was a natural-born storyteller. She would tell me stories in sign language from, and in fact would replicate by mime from Frank Sinatra to Sammy Davis Jr. to even close to her death, Michael Jackson. So she was just an animated person, and she passed that on to me and to my sisters. The upshot of all this is that in sharing these experiences, I wanted to share with other people how to sign. In fact, just recently I told the story of St. Josephina Bakhita. It was a wonderful story, and it's a story of extraordinary forgiveness, extraordinary compassion. Josephina Bakhita, and if I may take a moment or two, just talk about her for a moment, because it was a story that moved the audience, both deaf and hearing. I told this story at the diocese, but I also told the story in a workshop where there were hundreds of deaf people. Josephina Bakhita was born around 1869, give or take. She was born in the Sudan, in the Darfur region of the Sudan, and in Africa, of course. And she was kidnapped. She was kidnapped and sold into slavery, and suffered extraordinary torture and mutilation, and just it's a horrid story because she eventually wrote about it. But the upshot of the story is that after suffering so much, she eventually landed, if you will, in a convert, in a nunnery. In sign language is nunnery, a nunnery, period. And the nuns converted her. She was baptized, then became a novitiate, and then, of course, to become a nun. Well, here's the gist of her story that's so moving. And that's what I try to convey to the audience in terms of just sharing an experience. One of her students, because she eventually began to teach in the Catholic school, asked her what would she do if she were to meet her captors, if she were to meet those people who tortured her. And within a second, she said she did not think about it for a moment. She said, if I were to meet my captors, I would kneel and kiss their hand. Because if it were not for all that happened, I would not have become aware of and became a part of Christianity, nor would I have become a religious. And so there's a story of forgiveness, there's a story of love, there's a story of compassion, there's a story of suffering and perseverance. In fact, I have her card here that I was going to pass out to bring here. I didn't bring it with me. So that's the kind of story that I want to convey to my audience, and that's how I got into lay preaching, as it were. Preaching is again, I don't look at it as preaching per se. Right. I look at it as just reflecting. It's a learning process, and in sharing, for example, the gist of the gospel, or to in sharing what I've learned in talking with other individuals about a biblical scripture, what happens is that I begin to reflect. I begin to take in and absorb the spirituality. Sometimes, by the way, just by reflecting on it, I see another dimension. And I get another perspective. And then sharing with others, I get still another perspective. And that just reinvigorates, so to speak, my commitment, my love for my faith. And so it's really that kind of experience that I want to share and convey. It's an ongoing learning experience. It's an ongoing teaching experience. And it's an ongoing sharing experience. Learning is part of sharing, and that's all. It's all in that big boiling pot together.